Good afternoon, everybody. Everybody hear me all right? So under normal circumstances, maybe a few more minutes, given that this is the first plenary post-lunch, so the late lunch crowd can trickle in. But given that I have 15 minutes for George, and Jono ate 4 of those, and there's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this product, I think we should just get started. So, my name is Amit Bhatani. I've been at Dell for a little over 10 years now, and I oversee all the technical aspects of the Ubuntu program at Dell. I've been engaged since the very first launch of Phone we did at Dell roughly about 3.5 years ago. And so that's about me. I know that many of the folks, for the local audience here, we probably don't need any introductions for Mike right here, but nevertheless, given the viral nature of the coverage some of these UDS videos have online, Mike, if you want to quickly say a few words about yourself.
So, So my name is Michael Fry. I work for Canonical in the OEM Services Group, and I work with companies like Dell to create awesome Ubuntu-based solutions.
All right, cool. So let's get started. What are we here for? Ubuntu Lite. By show of hands, how many of you here have heard about Ubuntu Lite? Okay, quite a few of you. I think the last UDS, we had a little preview. Our fearless leader, Mark Shuttleworth, showed us a little showcase of what Ubuntu Lite, a few mock-up screenshots, and what the product is basically going to be. So at a high level, what's Ubuntu Lite? It's a simplified version of Ubuntu that is a perfect companion for a dual boot OS offering. So that being said, why is Dell and Canonical so excited about a dual boot OS offering when, as far as I can recall, the Ubuntu installer was fully capable of coexisting with alternate operating systems? So what's the big deal about a dual boot offering, right? So what we've seen is that it's, of course, it's doable to manually take an existing system within a primary OS, like say Windows, and get to a dual boot state using the installer and using some manual few easy clicks through the wizard. However, that being said, that's not what we found the mainstream consumers do. So there's been a lot of buzz about Ubuntu and Linux in general, and consumers are intrigued. They want to try and use it, but there's yet what we've seen a bit of inertia in trying it out on their own, especially given, am I avoiding the contract or warranty of the system by doing this myself? Am I going to hose my system? So those fears have always been there, right? So I think there's a lot of value in preloaded dual boot offerings that has been somewhat complicated and complex to do preloaded coming out of an OEM. If it was easy, it probably would have been done by now, right? So with that being said, so it's a dual boot offering. The question is, why go re-engineer and reinvent something that's quote-unquote lighter? Why not just take an off-the-shelf standard Ubuntu product and try to make that work as a dual boot offering with, say, Windows? The reason for that we've seen is that most people using general-purpose PCs don't really have a need for 2 general-purpose operating systems existing on the same system. There's a whole gamut of complexity and I guess more of an expectation that you set up when you have 2 full general-purpose operating systems on a system on file compatibility, profiles, credentials, and how they share and talk to each other. So there was not really an easy dangle. There was not an incentive, we felt, to do dual boot. So we have the standalone offerings of Ubuntu, we have the standalone offerings of Windows. What we did see, and as many of our competitors have also offered products, is that there is a niche space, that there is a void, and that customers, mainstream customers, are willing to give an alternate application or OS a try if there is an incentive there. It has to be something that application offers beyond what a general purpose OS offers. And we felt that web experience, a more streamlined web experience was something that consumers were willing, for the sake of willing, to try something else. So with that in mind, we took the off-the-shelf standard Ubuntu and started working on trying to make it more streamlined. And the two tenets that we felt the consumers were looking for in this web experience were speed, so it had to boot very fast. That was a huge incentive. We felt the customers would get over that inertia of trying something else besides what their, I guess, the security blanket is of the primary OS. The second is security. So we kind of tapped into those two tenets, and with that in mind, we developed Ubuntu Lite. So without further ado, we can probably just go into the demo on the particular product that we developed Ubuntu Lite on.
Thanks. So we wanted to make it really seamless for users to be able to boot from Windows into Ubuntu Lite. So we created a control panel in Windows that allows users to turn on or off the option of booting into Ubuntu Lite. So as you see here, this is a control panel that allows users to, when they turn the system on, actually show an OS chooser. So I'm going to boot the system, and you'll see that there's a graphical OS chooser that allows the user to toggle between Windows and or Ubuntu Lite, and it's all very seamless. And then at the last option here is the ability for users to share their data from Windows in Ubuntu Lite. So all their music, photos, videos that they have on Windows, they can see that data in Ubuntu Lite. We'll actually take a look there. The other goal of this was, as Amit said, to be very non-destructive to Windows. So this, we do not replace the MBR with grub. We have a nice mechanism for toggling active partitions so that we can sit side by side with Windows and not break anything having to do with the Windows side, especially for updates and recovery and so on.
Did you want to launch it from maybe the desktop? Because the tutorial doesn't show up when you launch the control panel.
So the first time the user launches the Ubuntu Lite control panel, there's a nice little wizard that will guide them through what is Ubuntu Lite and what are the benefits of it. So if you click on this Tell Me More option, it allows you to do IM, get on the web really fast without viruses, which is a good one. And being able to share your data back and forth between Windows and Ubuntu Lite. So the other thing we've added, and you'll see this when we boot into Ubuntu Lite, we made it easy for the users to actually go back to Windows as well. Since this is a companion operating system and not the only one, you'll see we'll have a little button in Ubuntu Lite that says boot back into Windows.
And a quick comment on the out-of-box experience is that this tutorial that Mike just showed us actually pops on the second boot. So the out-of-box experience is the consumer gets his Windows system. The experience is very native and pristine into Windows. Of course, he could. We've seeded shortcuts for this control panel application in a few places around, so he could discover it on his own. Nevertheless, for the sake of discoverability, if he had no idea that he had this cool companion app with him, on second boot and second boot only, a window pops up more to aid discovery, to tell the customer that there is a companion OS available if you would like to configure it. So by default, it's turned off, and he goes through a tutorial, maybe that helps him get a little more excited about the product, and then he goes to configuring Ubuntu Lite as Mike is showing now.
Okay, so I'm going to reboot now because I've enabled Ubuntu Lite.
So one of the beauties of it's kind of a double-edged sword is that it's very turnkey and customized for the current hardware, and that's what makes it fast and more streamlined. And so because of that, right now we have this working. Actually, let's just talk about the bootloader.
So this is the graphical OS chooser that comes up when the user has enabled Ubuntu Lite. And as you see here, the user is able to quickly toggle between the operating system that he wants to start. Now there is another option that I didn't point out in the Windows control panel. You can actually bypass this OS chooser and say, I always want to, Ubuntu Lite is so awesome, I don't ever want to boot Windows again. So you can always just boot Ubuntu Lite without ever seeing this this control panel.
Before you boot in, if there's interest in seeing how fast this performs, you are welcome to pull out your stopwatches. This screen appears roughly a second after the BIOS post screen is complete. The BIOS post on this particular machine is about 5 to 6 seconds, and then you add a second to get to this OS chooser screen. So from this point onwards, it is a 5-second timeout in which the default OS automatically boots. The customer is more than empowered to toggle and change his mind. This particular config is based on a basic hard disk. It's a 7200 RPM hard drive. I believe it's got the Broadcom wireless card, so you got to take all that with a grain of salt on. The actual underlying hardware configuration changes a lot in the boot performance speeds and things of that nature. So with that, we can probably start the boot process.
Might be some flickering here with the external monitor.
There we go.
A minute left, yep.
Right.
Perfect. Under 20 seconds. And so we're online right away. So the key here was we wanted to be on the web as fast as possible, not just to a desktop, but actually to a live web page as fast as possible. And quickly, in 1 minute, I'll just show, if we launch the media player here, we can see all the media that actually lives on our Windows disk. So all of this media is coming from the NTFS partition.
So as you can see, we built in a few other apps that we thought in the first pass, we want to keep this a very controlled environment and not go crazy with having to mimic more of the general purpose OS. So we have Empathy, we have a built-in version of Skype, and basically the multimedia player, which is about the only offline app that the customer will possibly use, and most of the things are based on online connectivity. So,
and then lastly, I just wanted to show this little icon here in the lower left is the way that the user would boot back into the primary operating system, which is Windows.
And quickly, this is fully open source, with the exception of maybe perhaps the Broadcom driver. It's translated in about 7 or 8 languages. We'll ship worldwide with a 100% attach rate on this particular system, which is the, I think it's the Inspiron 11, which you can find. It's been shipping for a few months now on Dell.com, and should be available soon. Do we have a minute for Q&A? Any questions?
Oh, the Windows boot? We don't have time.
We don't have time for that long process.
At the beginning, you were talking about the warranty. People were afraid of losing the warranty. If the user chooses to move fully to Ubuntu and installs Ubuntu as his primary operating system, will he or she keep his warranty, or will it be void still?
So the product is, the service team has ramped up to support Ubuntu Lite in its entirety in the given version. What will not be supported is, like, if you root the system and go ahead and start going crazy with installing a ton of other applications. But the image as is, which is fully supported through updates, will be fully supported.
One more question. Will the product be available in other countries?
Yes, so it pretty much follows a pattern of the platform itself. So all countries that ship this Inspiron 11, I believe the exact model name is M101Z. So if in your country the Inspiron M101Z is available online, then you can be rest assured that when you buy it preloaded with Windows 7, I think Home Premium is the one that is offered on this, that it will have this companion OS just installed on this own little 4th primary partition, and it's up to you to toggle it, enable it, and use it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure you hunt these guys down and get more details.
Wow. Okay, unfortunately, I'm up next. I've actually got 2 slots, so I've got a half-an-hour slot, but I'm going to try and finish as quickly as possible so you can ask them more questions, because I think it's way more interesting. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is a set of lessons that I think we've learned over the years with the Ubuntu community that I'd like us to think about as we continue to grow. So some of the content in this presentation is going to be a little bit more specific about some of the things that we're working on, and some of the content is going to be what I think will be things that will be good to think about while you're in UDS sessions. So we're all here by and large because we believe in Ubuntu. Like, we think that Ubuntu is a great way of delivering software freedom to people in a really great looking way, in a really great functioning way. Just getting here at UDS and watching how people work together and how people are passionate about different things is just incredibly inspiring, particularly when you're knee-deep in bugs halfway through a cycle. Part of the challenge with this is making it a great experience for everybody. And I believe that, so my job is the community manager, and my job is to help build what I believe should be a slick, compelling, and personal community. People should be able to come into Ubuntu inspired by the system that they use, the system that all of you folks have put together, and they should come into the community and say, I want to make this work, I want to contribute, I want to put my brick in the wall, I want to make this better in my own personal way. And we've got this fantastically diverse community in which you don't have to be able to code in C and have a quote-unquote neckbeard to participate. Everybody should be welcome, and everybody is welcome. But these three things, these are the three areas in which I try to base my work and our team's work. The problem is that Ubuntu is massive. It's huge. I mean, you know, we're a big community. We've got over 300 teams. We've got over 17,000 translators. We've got over 1 million people registered on the forums. Ubuntu is a big community. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of opinions. And there's a lot of ways in which people should be able to participate and make Ubuntu better. And growth is great, but growth has problems. I mean, so growth is great in the sense that we have, every time we have a UDS, we have different people coming. So we have the same faces that show up, but we also have new people every time who come with this bit between their teeth about how they'd like to participate in Ubuntu. They feel that sense of motivation and excitement that you feel when you first get involved in open source. That feeling of, I'm empowered to really change the world, and I'm going to change it through software. But the challenge is that you have scale, right? So I wrote a blog post about this recently. How many of you work in a company that has got more than 100 people working there? Yeah? How many of you work in a company that's got more than 200 people working there? Right? How many of you remember what it was like when there was like 30 people working in the company, right? The thing is anybody who's seen that level of change and transitioning in a company will know what it feels like for a company to scale upwards. Things that were really easy a year ago seem just a little bit more annoying to deal with. People seem less accessible. You want to do something simple, you usually have to fill out a form. All of these kinds of things become frustrating when companies get big, because companies put those things in place because they have to deal with the scale. Because it's not as easy as just going up to someone and saying, hey, could you do this for me? And the thing that really struck me was that scale affects communities as well. But it's really hard because there's not that many communities, that many open source communities that deal with huge scale issues, because most open source communities remain relatively small and manageable. You know, people generally can talk to other people and get what they need by a set of personal connections. But there are some communities that are huge. I mean, the kernel community is massive. The Wikipedia community is enormous. And likewise, Ubuntu is huge as well. I'd say that we're one of the biggest open source projects in the world. So with scale, we have some challenges. And one of those challenges is we have, these things don't work. We have a lot of things to remember. If we were to distill all of the things that we need to remember, the people in the room, it would be terrifying. Right? We have bugs. We need to know when the freezes are. What software lives in which packages, or which translations we ship. Which team do you join if you want to participate? How do you organize events? How do you get t-shirts for your events? Which parts of the wiki should we know and care about? Who are the developers? What is Motu? What is a core dev? What the hell are package sets? All of these things are details that we have to think and know about if you want to participate in a community that's got this level of detail. And at every UDS, we get people together, particularly people who've been participating in the community track, to say, how do we make this stuff easier? We were sat in a session yesterday, and one of the participants said, everyone assumes that you know how to use a wiki in Ubuntu. And it's a good point. A lot of people who are brand new to Ubuntu, a lot of people who join through our loco teams, will have no idea what a wiki is, let alone how you use it. So there's all of this detail that you need to consume to be able to be functioning and have that productive experience. And it's really hard. And what I want to do is I want us to distill this down and for us to get back to basics a little bit. I feel like, as a community, we've done amazing work in growing and handling this scale. But I feel like we need to get back to basics a little bit more and build in those slick, compelling, and personal connections. So these three words, I think, offer a level of insight in where we can focus and where we can improve things. So I just wanted to talk through a couple of these things. Slick. We need to have a community where people can say, I want to do this, and they can do it almost immediately, where they have the knowledge, the access to the tools, and the areas of opportunity in which they can be productive quickly. We've all joined open source communities. Well, most of us have joined open source communities where you say, I wouldn't mind, I'd like to participate in this, this, and this. And people say, okay. And then you have to jump through about 150 hoops to actually get something done. One of the challenges with scale is that usually when more and more people are joining the community, you set up processes to deal with the scale. And those processes can sometimes get disconnected from those people who the processes were designed for. So somebody joins and you say, okay, you need to read this process on this wiki page. They read it and they take part, but it seems overly complicated. And that gets away from us having a slick community. So take, for example, all of these things. If we were to take bugs as one such example, this is the way we usually deal with scale, right? So we say, okay, we want to make bugs, participating in bugs, and bug triage much easier. So what we do is we ask a set of questions. How do I get started? How do I learn the skills to participate? How do I get the tools that I need to do this work? How do I know what to work on? How do I share my knowledge with other people who are participating in the community? And importantly, how am I outed as the total rock star that I am? If I do really good work, how do people see my good work so they know that I'm contributing? Now that last question is typically something that individual contributors don't ask. That's something that we want to see happen in communities because we're a meritocracy. You do good work, rock and roll. So what we do is we usually take all of those things, typically sat in a session around a fishbowl, and we come up with a set of steps. So for each of these things, we may have a landing page for how do you get started. How do I learn the skills to participate? Well, we'll put that on a wiki page. How do I get the tools I need to work on? Well, we probably provide a list of these tools and maybe some app tools. And we try and solve each of these problems, often as an individual component, but they don't necessarily connect together very well. Unfortunately, typically when you go through each process, when you go through each step, it can actually feel like this incredibly complicated process because we've produced a very linear path in which people participate in the area of bugs. So this is the way typically communities deal and companies deal with handling scale. And this is the reason why processes can feel a bit unwieldy. And I don't think it has to be this way. So there is another perspective. This. Now, there are two ways of describing JFDI. There's some debate on the F. I believe, being a good human being, that it means for please. There are some other ways of describing it. The thing about JFDI, which is just do it, is a perspective of the usual view is, oh, these processes, they're getting me down. Just go and do it. Just go and get on with it. And George and I had a conversation about this a few weeks ago. some of you probably saw George's post on Planet about just doing it. JFDI is a really good concept, but the problem with JFDI is that it doesn't scale. Because if everyone just did it, then there'd be chaos. In my mind, the solution isn't necessarily, in every case, the JFDI. The solution is to fix the processes so they allow people to JFDI. So we need a balance of both. We need people to feel really empowered in participating, but we also need to make sure that when we do have people come in and follow our processes, that they're really simple and really easy to follow. So there's a few areas in which we're trying to fix this. One is surveys. So this all comes under the banner of domain knowledge. Like, one thing I learned a long time ago in Ubuntu is so for example, to make development processes easier, you really need to understand what it's like to be a developer. And you also need to understand the pain that it feels when the processes don't work. So the best people who can fix processes are the people who have domain knowledge. So we've been reaching out to a bunch of different parts of the community, the translations community, the server community. We've been talking to documentation writers and all these kinds of other people, right? And we've been saying, how can we make things easier? So we've got surveys. We're interviewing people as well. We're talking to the most recent 5 contributors who've joined a community and said, what was it like to get involved? And some people have given us some real insight that says, well, you know, you told me to go to this wiki page, but I couldn't find it, and it was somewhere else on the wiki, and it turned out that the wiki page was broken. Like, little simple things like that really get in the way of people getting started. The other thing is bottlenecks. If you have surveys and interviews, you identify some of those bottlenecks, and also what resources you need to be effective. So these are some of the areas in which we're trying to tease out of those with domain knowledge, how we can make those processes easier. The other thing which we've been trying to do is, there's a guy called Story Musgrave, and he has been into space like 6 times. He's a really well-known astronaut. He was on the Apollo program. He's 75 years old. His wife is 30. He's got a 4-year-old son. His oldest son is 50. He's got a landscaping business. He's a qualified heart surgeon. This guy is ridiculously talented, makes you sick. And he has a big thing about visualizing things to make them easier. So for example, I asked Daniel Holbach to do something, was to look at the things that we need to learn and to mind map it. Mind maps are a really good way of visualizing linear processes to give you a better idea of how it all spreads out. So if you want to learn something regarding development, look at all that. It's ridiculous. There's a lot to learn. So when you can visualize that data in such a way, it helps you be able to figure out better paths through those things that you do need to learn to be successul. So we're encouraging people to do this as well. One of the best things about face-to-face discussion is that you can draw things. You can draw on whiteboards and post-it notes and stuff like that. So please, while you're at UDS, visualize things as much as you can. Compelling. Freedom is a feature. We're not just making software. There's some people in this room love the technology. We all love the technology. The reason why I got involved in Ubuntu is because I believe we're changing the world. I believe we're bringing freedom in software to people. We're changing people's lives. That's, to me, the most important thing that we're doing here. The technology is just a way of doing it. We need to not forget this. And when we're knee-deep in bugs and blueprints and UDS sessions, we should never forget that freedom is, I think, why we're doing this. And I believe that one thing we need to do is we need to refocus our ethos. I feel like over the years with Ubuntu, we've done a really good job of making things easier and delivering great technology and making the community accessible. But I feel like we sometimes forget why we do what we're doing. And then when you see a 6-year-old kid in a coffee shop using Ubuntu, you get this weird fuzzy feeling. And I think people need to feel that fuzzy feeling more often. So I'm going to be encouraging people to be advocating stories such as this. Like, we've all got stories of where our software has touched people's lives in really, really nice ways. We need more stories about that. We need to expose people to the benefits of freedom. Unfortunately, everybody's got a different definition of freedom. And we should stop talking about how we have different viewpoints and talk about whether they're the same. So we need to expose people to why freedom is really important and how our software really opens up people's lives. And it's humanity. I mean, the thing I love about UDS is we get together and we shake hands and we hug each other and we drink a variety of different liquids and we eat a variety of different foods and we get on as people who are united by really cool software. So I think we should not forget that for a second. And just wrapping towards this is the most important one for me, personal. This is where I think we've got the most work. I think Ubuntu's got to be a personal experience, not a process experience. We have a lot of governance boards, a lot of processes, a lot of ways in which people participate. And those have all been there to deal with scale as we've grown over the years. And I think we really need to start thinking about how we make it a personal experience. I was talking yesterday in a session about our developer processes. And one of the challenges that we face is dealing with when people contribute content to Ubuntu. So you fix a bug, you contribute it to the sponsorship queue. And then the sponsorship queue is a big list of things that we expect our developers to review and to have a conversation with the developer over. And this process happens multiple times before that person eventually becomes a developer. One of the concerns I have about this is that you have less of that one-on-one experience. Like there's been open source communities that I've joined. A good example was GStreamer. I did some work on Jacosia, and I knew nothing about GStreamer. And there's a guy called Edward Hervey who wrote Pitavy. And he became my point person in GStreamer. So I tried doing something, I'd screw it up horrifically bad. And then he'd tell me how to fix it, and then I'd do something else, and he'd tell me how to fix that. And we developed a personal relationship, a friendship with each other. I didn't fix something and put it in a queue. I didn't follow a process that was slightly disconnected from people. I think we should get back to that. I think Ubuntu should get back to you want to solve a problem, you go and tap someone on the shoulder that you know, and we make it easier to understand who the people are in the room. And sure, it's not as scalable, but I think there's ways in which we can make it scalable. So this personal element is, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because throughout your UDS sessions today, I'd like you to all reflect on your experiences in Ubuntu since you joined, and how personal they've been, and when the most pleasant experiences were. And I'm willing to bet every single one of you right now that when you think of the most pleasant experiences that you've had in Ubuntu or free software, it's been when there's been a personal connection with somebody else. Like, oh my God, I met Colin Watson today. I always like embarrassing him. Stop being a legend. But things like that, those personal experiences, when you really connect with somebody, when you meet somebody that you've only talked to on IRC, it's incredibly satisfying, and it's the reason why we're building software socially together. It's the reason why we're not some nameless arsehole in a proprietary software company. We're doing this because it's fun and people are involved, and it makes people's lives better. So, in wrapping, I really do think we're coming up to our finest hour. I think what we're doing here is really important work that has to I don't want to blow too much smoke up us all, but I believe that the work that we're doing here in Ubuntu and in the various upstream projects that feed into Ubuntu is going to change the lives of people who use computers for generations. And I think it's phenomenally important that we remember that the software that we're building is for people, and it's the people that makes us excited about what we do. So I just don't want us to squander it. I think we have a great opportunity, and sometimes it's good to say, let's break some of these processes down and let's bring a little bit more humanity into the way we do things. The processes have served us well, and we will always need processes, but I think getting up and saying, okay, how can we build those one-on-one connection links is great. So we're looking for help. I'm sure most of you know Daniel Holbach and George Castro, David Planella. Unfortunately, Ahmed Kamal's not here. You know us. If you've got anything you'd like to contribute, anything you'd like to do to make this easier, if you have any thoughts, good or bad, then come and grab us. If you don't know any of those people and you want to send someone an email, send it to that email address. And it might be read. But thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening to me rambling. All right, Scott Ritchie. Give Scott a round of applause.
While he's setting up, Jono went through his as fast as he could, and we're going to get the Ubuntu Lite guys back up at the end to do more Q&A.
So, thank you, Jono, for going fast. I'm going to go fast too. We say that life is short, and so maybe I can be as well. This is software that saves lives. It's kind of a dramatic thing, and I guess it's fitting following what Jono was talking about. So I'm going to start with a brief story from last UDS. I've been to a lot of UDSs, but the last one I went to was kind of the most memorable to me, because when I came home, something happened. My father sat me down and told me that he had been sick for the past few weeks, and that he was going to various doctors, and he wasn't sure what was wrong, and they referred him to different things and tried a bunch of medicines. Nothing really worked. And it finally had an MRI done, and it turned out that he had cancer of some kind. And so when you have cancer and you don't know what kind it is, things are, in a sense, even less certain than they were before, right? So what you do is you go to doctors, and they give you scans, and they refer you to other doctors and specialists, and you go and you generate a whole lot of data, right? And this is data that is very important, right? You have all of your medical history in an ever-growing stack. And this is stuff that a doctor needs to treat you. He needs to know what kind of cancer you probably have, but also what your life has been like up to then. And so I took him to a lot of these doctors, and I went and saw how this system operates. And to me, I was kind of interested in the data part, because when it comes to medical data, the question is, how do we share it? And how does this data move along with you? And for a lot of cases, the answer is manila folders and fax machines. This sucks, right? It really sucked because at the same time as Dad was sick, my cat got sick. And I took him to the vet, and they had a very nice computer system. So there's a little mismatch. There's a problem, right? So all these bits go with you, right? Sometimes it's handwriting from a doctor. Sometimes it's, you know, doctor's handwriting is terrible, by the way. But sometimes it's computerized notes. Sometimes it comes from different systems, right? But we have this stuff, and it needs to come with you, right? So computers. These manila folders and fax machines were a big problem. Everyone saw it. So for a long time, everyone has been talking about computers, right? How do we make computers work for medical records? And initially, you had a lot of thought that was just about replacements, right? So instead of having a huge patient history file that was some manila folder full of stuff, maybe we'd have a database full of information. And instead of a doctor writing handwritten notes, maybe we'd have fancy tablets or something like that. So this leads, however, to a big software problem. So once you have a bunch of computers and a bunch of software, you start to realize you have different software, right? And then we have to worry about sharing data between systems. But it's not just that, right? We don't have just the software problem of what we have from creating the software. We still have the initial problem, right? Medicine is about the problem of people dying, people being sick, right? So, for instance, in the United States, there's an estimated 98,000 people every year who die from hospital mistakes, right? So some of these might be fixable by realizing the mistake before it happens, right? So to some extent, you can fix this with software. Maybe you have a software system that not only knows the patient's history, but is smart enough to remind you of things. For instance, if you're about to prescribe a medicine they're allergic to, that's something that we can check for programmatically, right? So the requirements for this software are massive, right? We have software that needs to carry all your data around with you. It needs to share between multiple systems. But at the same time, it also needs to be private, which is a very strange case. It also needs to work in an emergency. If you have a medical emergency right now, I'm taking you in an ambulance ride down to the hospital, they need to figure out by the time you get there everything about your history that might be medically relevant, right? And you might not even be conscious at the time. Okay, so what has been done to address this software problem? Well, I'd like to just give a few examples. One is the Vista Project. This is not the other Vista. This is a program that started from the Veteran Affairs. That's why the VA is capitalized. The Veteran Affairs Administration is a United States federal government service for veterans, right? And also their families. And so there's a whole lot of people covered by Veterans Affairs that might have medicine through there, and they were one of the first to create a real comprehensive computer system. Now the nice thing about this is that it's a federal government, United States work of the federal government, and so it falls under the public domain. So this immediately became a large open source project. All the code was available. So what's happened is a whole bunch of software has come from the Vista project and formed the Vista family of software derivatives. So there are companies out there that have put their own patches and code and their own versions of Vista to sell as their own product. And some of them are completely fully open source. For instance, there's a company called MedSphere that makes a product called OpenVista, which is Vista with some additions to it. They also try to create a community. So you can go to medsphere.org and you can join in on the health software development and help with your own modules and so forth, right? But it's not just Vista. There's a whole bunch of software packages out there. If you go to Wikipedia, there's a 4-page list of open source medical software and then like a 20-page list of medical software, right? So all this software has to work together, including the proprietary stuff. All right, so how do we move that data around? Well, there's something called the Direct Project. The Direct Project is supposed to be a tool for sharing data between different medical record systems. The Direct Project, I am very happy with the way it's going to work and the way they've demonstrated it working so far, and one of the reasons why it works so well is that it's made by people like us. I met one of the principal developers of the Direct Project at a conference a while back. He's Brian Bellendorf from Apache, right? So he was borrowed to work on this, and he showed a demo of it, and it was some pretty exciting stuff. I met Brian at the conference. He asked me, "Why are you here?" Right? Why am I there? Well, I mean, I have my own story for being there, but one of the reasons I was there is that it turns out that a lot of this medical record systems use client-server models. And the servers sometimes run on Linux, sometimes run on Windows, but the clients also can run on either Linux or Windows. And it turns out a lot of the Windows clients are better than the Linux ones, and so there's a wine issue too. But that's all that wine is related to this. So, anyway, so I met Brian. Brian and I have an interesting history because I met him at this medical records conference talking about the Direct Project. In the United States, we just passed like a year ago, we passed a large healthcare bill. And one of the things that was included in it was about $20 billion of subsidy for medical record systems. So if you're a doctor and you're getting rid of your manila envelopes, you can get some portion of $20 billion to do this. And it's not clear right now whether we're going to do this the right way or the wrong way. The first time I met Brian was about 8 years ago when we had, after the elections in 2000, when the United States government decided that we did voting machines all wrong. And the United States government gave $20 billion to make voting machines better. And we completely screwed that up. All right. So every time I've met Brian, there's $20 billion on the line. Okay. So billions of dollars, right? So something not obvious about me is I didn't actually study computer science in college. I have an economics degree. And so when I see all these problems, I end up thinking about them like an economist might. And so to an economist, $20 billion on the line, in fact, much more on the line, is a big thing, right? Because billions and billions of dollars can actually be compared to lives. And in order to do that, you need to talk about the value of a life, right? We have so many dollars, we have so many lives. How do we do it? Well, we're not really talking about the value of a life, right? We want to save as many lives. Lives are precious. But to an economist, we're actually talking about the price of a life, right? Now, the price of saving a life. If you want to kill someone, that's a lot cheaper. I would know. Okay, so saving a life, right? So it turns out there's a lot of ways to save lives. You can do it through a whole bunch of means. In fact, this is a very well-studied problem in economics. How much money does it cost on average to save a life? Well, you can do a lot of studies, but it turns out that on average, the answer is about $10 million in the developed world. Right? So for every $10 million of wealth you create, people will spend it sort of naturally on things that save their own lives or their friends' lives. So for instance, if you're wealthier, you might be less likely to work in somewhere hazardous. You might buy some safer safety equipment. You might buy a newer car that keeps you safer, and so on. You might also buy better medical care, right? So it all kind of works together, and there's these various things you're spending on to save a life. So really, if you want to save lives, all you need to talk about is making wealth, right? If you want to save lives, you don't have to be a doctor, right? I mean, being a doctor is a clear, obvious way of saving lives, but it can also be things like helping people get to doctors, helping people live in situations where they don't need doctors to begin with. It turns out you don't even need to be a doctor. You could be a mere software developer, right? So we're software developers, at least a lot of us. We work on software. How can we save people a bunch of money, make a bunch of wealth, and save lives? Well, to do that, we have to talk about the value of software, right? So if you want to estimate the value of software, it's a lot. Okay, that's my answer. At the very minimum, right, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on proprietary software. We buy huge installations of Windows. We spend other hundreds of billions of dollars a year on maintaining this software, right? You know, all the money that a corporation spends, not just buying Windows, but hiring people to clean up the viruses and stuff, computer janitors, that's money that they're spending, right? And all this money that they're spending is at least the value of the software, right? If they're not getting more than they're paying for it, it's not clear, right? So there's a whole lot of wealth in software. This is not new information, right? But let's talk about something closer to us, the value of free software, right? If we are no better than the competition, at the very least, the value of what we're doing is what they're saving in money, right? So if we just simply talk about Ubuntu as a replacement for all the proprietary software that it's competing with, then the value of Ubuntu is at the very least all those hundreds of billions of dollars, right? That's a huge amount, right? We already have something like 12 million users, give or take 20 million. We're not really sure. So probably not take 20 million. I don't think we have negative 8 million users, but either way, right? We have 12 million, a lot of people. It's some value to them. Multiply this together, you get a huge number, and that's amazing. Okay. Put it more simply. We're here to do our jobs, right? We're here to make Ubuntu better. We're here to provide that free software. We're here to make things better for a lot of people. This is value, and whether or not you see the value underneath, it's not just what people are using the software for. It's the stuff that enriches their lives because they've been using that software. The fact that their software problems are solved and they can now have other money, other resources, other time to devote to other things. And those other things can be saving lives. So we should remind ourselves that what we do is important, right? It is very important. And to an economist, lives depend on it. So thank you.
So we have 5 minutes left. More questions about Ubuntu Lite. I see everyone's tweeting the heck out of it.
Oh, while you go over there, interesting the interaction you're having with the file system from the Windows partition. Specifically, the fact that since you've got a web browser and I might want to download stuff, we all know that, for example, the file system on Windows might have issues with certain characters in the names. It might have issues with the length of those paths and so on and so forth. How have you solved that issue?
So we didn't do anything special other than it's an NTFS file system, so there isn't any issues with file length. Right.
Let's say that I've got my old COM applications running on Windows, like Notepad, for example, and I downloaded the file from the web, and I call it test with capital T, and I'm a bit of an idiot, and I downloaded another file called test with lower t, for example. You will have issues in that case, and you will have issues not because the file system supports longer paths than 255, I believe, but with old applications that don't know how to handle that. So I'm wondering what are the users going to expect from you, or what are their reactions?
Right. We didn't do anything special to handle, users doing stuff differently. We just made available the files from their, primary OS to be viewable in Ubuntu Lite. That's as far as we've taken it so far.
What changes did you make to speed up the boot?
What changes? So basically, we just piggybacked off of what the distro team, the main Ubuntu, has already done, and we did some tweaks. Like we don't run GDM here. We have a small C program that actually launches the X server and the desktop environment. We took out delayed some things that happen in boot till after the user interface is up. Ran boot chart endlessly to nitpick all the little details of what we could delay until after the user interface is up. Oh, the other thing we did was, for example, to get us on the network quicker, we by default make all Wi-Fi connections, system-wide connections. So just things like that, little tweaks here and there that when you add them all up, make a big difference. Well, you read ahead obviously is a big portion of this of the boot speed here.
Time for my 2 more questions. Anybody?
While George is sprinting, I just want to say congratulations to Dell for being. This is a bold, move for a major computer maker to support an alternate operating system alongside Windows. I want to give a round of applause. I think it's a bold move.
Hi. The graphical OS chooser that you demonstrated, is that extensible? Is that something we could potentially use in standard Ubuntu?
Yeah, I'm getting a maybe from Colin Watson. But it's actually that's actually Grub. The OS chooser is implemented in Grub, and we could talk about that. I don't know the answer to that, but it is. It certainly works well, and but it has some limitations. What we've done with it has some limitations in the generic version of Ubuntu in terms of supporting multiple kernels, recovery mode, and so on, that isn't exposed to the user.
Can I use Ubuntu One and sync files?
Yes. Yeah, it's not installed by default in this version of Ubuntu Lite, but you certainly could install it and use it.
And Software Center?
Software Center is Software Center installed on here? Not on this version, no. But right. So on this version of Ubuntu Lite, there is no application browser. So if you did install new software, it wouldn't show up on the launcher, and we have no way for the user graphically to get to the new applications. You can launch them, obviously, from a terminal, but we did this by design, that we wanted a limited set of functionality for the user.
One more question? Nobody?
So while that question is being asked, I also wanted to quickly mention that we worked hard to also make the recovery solution rock solid for two reasons. One, because the mainstream customer is very accustomed to having very fancy ecosystem of recovering his, not just the OS back to the factory state, but also like with all the data and all that stuff on Windows. And so as a side effect of doing that, what we'd also have, which I think a lot of the customers will appreciate, is having the holistic recovery ISO image available on support.del. So I think it's protected by the requirement for having to enter a valid Dell service tag. That'll give you access to the recovery image, which you can then download onto a USB key, your CD, DVD, and boot off of that, and be able to do this yourself if you didn't already get it in that state.
My one question is that Windows on occasion has been known to smash dual booting by overriding the bootloader. What are you doing to protect the Ubuntu One environment from getting clobbered? And this is especially a use case if Windows 7 is upgraded to Windows 8 in the near and present future if 8 ever exists.
Right, so this was specifically architected for those types of solutions. We do not touch the Windows, the MBR or the BCD for Windows. We actually have a special Windows service that runs that actually toggles the active flag on partitions. So Windows doesn't even know that we exist. So any Windows upgrades or anything will not allow you or disallow you to get back into Ubuntu Lite. One thing I actually wanted to mention that we didn't mention earlier was the first time that Ubuntu Lite boots, we automatically read from the Windows environment your keyboard setup, your language, the username that enabled Ubuntu Lite. So all this stuff, we pull all this information automatically from the Windows environment, so the user doesn't have to do anything.
I want to ask if Dell is planning to track how much time I use it, how much people are going to use it compared to Windows for data.
Right. So there's not a built-in tracker per se to actually that kind of does a handshake back to some server to tell us how many to have a little count going on, but we could obviously track it using the update manager mechanism, right? So update manager is enabled by default, and customers will be prompted as and when the upgrade's available. So I think all the pings that go back to the custom app repo can be easily tracked, and there is a lot of interest in actually gauging so we will know from a time we turn Ubuntu Lite live, we will know how many systems we've shipped, and we ourselves are very curious for the future of this program to know and be able to sell to upper management on how many of the customers who bought these were actually using Ubuntu Lite. So there's a lot of interest in that internally. Just the standard apt ping pong back thing, you should be able to track it on some basis on that.
Okay, thanks guys, we're out of time. Where can people find you?
Hallways, or I'm on Twitter. I think I've just recently did a #UDS tweet, so you can find me on that too.
All right, thanks. Let's get back to work.